Welcome to the TH Fantasy Football Show, hosted by Hestel and Ed.
Hello and welcome to the next in our series of fancy deep dives as we explore all 32 teams in the NFL and see what they have on your fantasy plate. We start with a team. Well, we're going to look at a team today who haven't really been fantasy relevant recently, but there might be a few brighter spots this season, and that is the Carolina Panthers. Just a reminder, we're looking at redraft PPR when we're looking at scoring and things like that. But as always, let's start off in the quarterback position, Mark, with someone who's maybe got something to prove this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. So Bryce Young, we'd hoped for great things for him. I think as a show, we were torn in the Bryce Young, CJ Stroud debate. And at the minute, CJ Stroud was the right answer, but I don't think it's necessarily a complete kind of cast iron decision on that at the minute. So when we're looking at Bryce Young from last year, from week 12 onwards, he was the QB9 for fantasy, and he had 3 top 12 weeks. Looking at his actual performance on the field as well, he was 5th in the league for average depth of target and 2nd in the league for QB scrambles. And obviously we know that all yardage gained on the ground by a quarterback is that fancy cheat code rafter. He was on pace over that window, if it was over the whole season, for 450 rushing yards, which that's 45 extra fantasy points, potential for a couple of rushing touchdowns. That's exciting as fantasy managers. The O-line is okay. Hubbard is reliable. Tet McMillan is a great compliment now. I've currently got Bryce Young down for around QB 16 to 18. So he's in that sort of region that you're streaming him. If you've got 2 quarterbacks, you'll pick the best matchup. He might be one of your more favorable options on the waiver wire when we get to the bye weeks. But when we're looking that he was 21.7 points per game over those last 7 games, honestly, I'm not saying this to try to get clicks or try to take. I genuinely don't think anybody could rule out that we definitely wouldn't see a top 12 season from Bryce Young. I think it's certainly in his range of possible outcomes. Am I saying I'm going to draft him that highly? Absolutely not. Drafting him at cost factors in that risk. But I do think we could be potentially in for that breakout season for Bryce Young based on what we've seen so far. How do you feel about Bryce Young?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it was definitely more than just green shoots towards the end of last season. He looked more settled. He looked more composed. And, you know, in real life NFL, and of course that translated to his fantasy score as well. There's definitely been an upgrade in his weapons, you would suggest, one in particular. Provided he connects well with Tet McMillan, who knows? I definitely agree with your kind of range of where he is, QB 16 to 18. I think that's probably a decent kind of aim for Bryce Young. But yeah, it's good to see him kind of progressing because he did have a really tough start to his NFL career.
Looking at kind of the batch of quarterbacks that are going around him at the minute. So we've got Lawrence, Penix, Stafford, then Bryce Young, and then just below in the ADP, Tua, Geno, Rodgers. Other than Penix, I think we know what all of those other quarterbacks are. If you're going to go for a gamble, it's Bryce Young and Penix that I would find more appealing. Yeah, there are safer floor options there, 100%. I just think that the potential ceiling for Bryce Young is, I think, maybe higher than Penix. I think. So, yeah, I'm not saying go and spend loads of draft capital on him. I'm not saying take him as your only QB or your QB1. But in Superflex, I'd be quite confident in taking the gamble with him as QB2. If I'm going to take a backup quarterback, I'm happy to take Bryce Young. Best ball, if Bryce Young's there and I think it's a value, I'm happy to go as well. Yeah, I think he's an interesting quarterback and he's one of the more exciting quarterbacks for me to see what this season looks like.
Definitely, I completely agree. Much more exciting than previous seasons. And who's he got supporting him? Let's move on to running back. Who's up first at running back?
So first we've got the RB14 on last year, Chubba Hubbard. He was being drafted very, very low last year. He returned you 8 top 12 finishes, 16.1 points per game. It was a slow start, but after that, he was solid for most of 2024. So between weeks 3 and 16, so we say he had a very dodgy game one. Week 2 wasn't filling with much hope. I think he was probably sat on every single bench where he'd been drafted week 3. But that's where he started to really kind of come in. He then missed the last 2 games of the season. But between weeks 3 and 16, he rarely let you down. He just put up solid points. Of his games, he finished as RB1 in 44.4% of games. He was a top 24 running back in just over half. He only had bust weeks in 2 games. And so they were those first 2. Rico Dowdle does present more of a challenge in the form of his carries. We've got to kind of take that into account. But you're getting currently Chubba Hubbard as RB17 on ADP. Sorry, RB18 ADP. I've got him ranked around RB17, so same, the split hairs really. 1,000-ish yards, 6 to 8 touchdowns, 200-ish receiving yards, I feel is a reasonable outlook for the year. And where you're getting him, I think you could do a lot worse for your RB2 in fantasy drafts this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely, he seems just rock solid in terms of where you're drafting him. And I think he has a very, very kind of high floor. You almost guaranteed points with him unless something goes wrong. And last year he rewarded his managers, didn't he? Because as you can see on the screen, his ADP was RB43 and he massively outperformed that. And I completely expect him to end up in a similar sort of range this year. You mentioned Rico Dowdle. Do you think he's going to provide much competition?
He was decent in 2024, and the second half of the season, he saw 20 opportunities per game at the Cowboys. Only 3 running backs saw more per game than that. Saquon, Jonathan Taylor, and Bijan Robinson. So workload, he was in elite company. I hate this landing spot for Rico Dowdle. I think it's an awful landing spot because it's Chubba Hubbard's backfield. That is what the backfield's been. Well, that's Rico Dowdle. He's been bought in to get carries. I think it's a 1-year contract, though, so it's not a lot of faith being put into him in that. He could grow into a meaningful role. It just feels unlikely that it's going to be worth it with Chubba Hubbard ahead of him. Potentially a bit of a late round pickup. At the minute, I've got potential flex option because we need to see what the role is. I think there's some uncertainty there. We've said on a few shows, I couldn't care less whatever coach speak we hear between now and the start of the season. We'll wait till we see ourselves what happens. But at best, at the minute, for me, feels like a bit of a bench stash till we see what that role is, or if Hubbard misses time. And that's never how I particularly like to do my drafting, is based on that. But if you're picking up later, that's kind of that risk is baked in, isn't it? You may end up dropping him after a little while. You may end up having a fantasy flex usable asset on your roster.
Yeah, as you say, it's such a disappointing landing spot for Rico Dowdle because I do really rate him, and I don't think he's going to get anywhere near RB23, which is where he finished last year, because it's not going to be a 1A, 1B situation, I wouldn't have thought. He's back up to Chubba Hubbard. So you might be looking from a kind of DFS point of view of like running back friendly matchups where he might get a few extra points, but barring injury, I can't see him eating too much into Hubbard's workload. Plus, there's someone else snapping at his heels in the shape of a rookie.
Would you like my succinct version on Trevor Etienne, Ed?
He is related to Travis Etienne. Is that true? Yeah.
I'll give you a bit more than that.
Okay.
College production, underwhelming. He's undersized. He's behind one very good running back, one solid running back. Is likely irrelevant. Is on there because his name's Etienne.
There.
So, his receiving work is the reason I think we can't completely ignore him. So 32 receptions, 194 yards. If that transfers and he has a receiving role, especially when I'm going to be quite negative on the tight ends, so that those shorter yardage receptions, I think there could be some possible value for him out of the backfield. Maybe. For me, though, you're not drafting him. You're watching the waiver wire, and he could maybe be useful, but he's one to watch for me.
Yeah, he's someone we weren't very hot on in a strong running back class, and they invested a decent amount of draft capital in him. So suggesting that, as you suggested, Rico Dowd will look like almost a 1-year option. But I certainly don't think he's going to be relevant this year.
Before we move on, please do take a moment to subscribe, to like, and to give us a share as well. If people head over to our channel, Ed, what will they find?
Well, they'll find all sorts of things. There's lots of exciting little shorts, all of the other 31 deep dives that we've worked so very hard for in preparation for the new season. And then, moving towards, it's getting close, Mark. It's getting close. The NFL season is approaching, and we are both getting very excited.
So we are recording this on the 23rd of July. So if anything is outdated by this point, that is why, because we cannot predict the future. If we could, we would win all of our fantasy championships. But yeah, we are getting close, and we have to have that little think at this stage as well about where we're going to think. And I'd like to move on next to wide receiver and the new man in town, Tet McMillan. I say pick 8 in the draft. The draft capital is absolutely there for him. We really enjoyed watching him in our kind of pre-draft shows as well. Let's be very, very clear. We look at the wide receiver class this year compared to last. We would not be as excited if he was in last year's crop. He is not on a par with those top wide receivers we saw last year, but the key thing for fantasy is he looks nailed on to be the wide receiver one in Carolina, therefore lead targets. So he's worth something for fantasy. Absolutely. I've got him currently as wide receiver 36. The reason for that is I think he'll end the season outperforming that. But we often see rookie wide receivers, especially, take a little bit of time to kind of build in and start to find their feet with production. There is lots of question marks around the Carolina Panthers as well, if we're completely honest, regardless of how optimistic we'd like to be. I think top 24 finishes each week will happen at points to the second half of the season. His ADP, though, of wide receiver 29 does, for me, feel like he's being drafted at his ceiling. So as high as I am on him, I'm very much thinking we're going to have a bit of a season of two halves. So to take him at current ADP, it's very much going to depend what else your roster looks like at wide receiver at that point. And to be honest, by the time you're wide receiver 29, probably not complete. And to take a gamble on McMillan, potentially not seeing a huge amount early season, for me, that's a bit of a rich pick at this stage to be taking your flex spot.
Yeah, I think people see, top receiver picked, going into a favourable situation, and he is maybe getting slightly overdrafted in the sense that people think he's onto a winner. But you're right to point out the fact that sometimes mostly rookie receivers do take time to get going. He does, I think, have a higher ceiling than where you're projecting him, and I would not be surprised to see him knocking on the door of top 20, top 25. That's a push, maybe. He's got the talent, but certainly not as talented as some of the receivers that we've seen over previous years. It'd be fascinating to see how he links up with Bryce Young, because to be brutally honest, Bryce Young hasn't had much to throw at in his NFL career. So it'd be nice to see him linking up with some talent. There isn't really much behind him at receiver, is there?
Well, there's the oldest man in the NFL. Well, we're always unkind to how old Adam Thielen is. He's 34. Younger than me, a lot younger. He's comfortably younger than us. But by wide receiver terms, he's a very, very old man. I've got a game though, Ed. Over under 3.5 is the line. How many top 24 finishes does Adam Thielen have this season? Are you taking the over or the under on 3.5?
Top 24?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a tough line. You're a bookie. I would say I think you've absolutely nailed the line, because I think he's probably going to end on about 3 or 4. I can't see him doing much more than that.
No, but he will do that.
Sorry, I ruined the game there.
Yeah, what are you going for? Pick over or under?
I'll go over.
over. So we go for 4. We're not going 5, are we? 4 would be that will happen, and then he'll probably do nothing for other games as well. I think Adam Thielen is going to be your DFS dart throw when he's in a favourable matchup and is at a decent price. He's 34. Tet McMillan's in town. Goodbye and thank you, Adam Thielen, from a fancy point of view. Xavier Leggett.
Well, it feels like there's room for. You're going to talk about Leggett in a minute, but it feels like there's room for them to maybe get someone else in, because I'm not sure if like McMillan, Thielen, and Leggett are going to get much done.
No, you're exactly right. I think it would make sense for still at the time of recording, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen are out there. They'd be quite nice pickups if Carolina had space and on the cap. Would be useful. Xavier Leggett, as it stands, potential weekly flex option if the offense is good in 2025, if he is able to kick on. I'm not drafting him, though. Wouldn't be myself to draft him. I don't think we need to. He's one that he could have a role. We could mention him later in the season. And I'm not going to get much more kind of optimistic when we move on to the next position either, Ed.
Yeah, I mean, arguably, I would argue that maybe the tight ends are slightly more interesting than the receivers. I know that's not saying much, but there's possibly a bit more value here, or am I just clutching at straws?
Well, after you said you're more interested, the first 2 words I have written on my notes are not interested.
Okay.
So, I mean, they split snaps in 2024. Sanders saw 9% of the target share. I need more than that. 43 targets, 33 receptions, 342 yards. Not really interested. Tremble saw a career high, 234 yards from 23 receptions.
Can we just have a moment for one of the best names in the NFL?
Yeah, unless Sanders really emerges as a target for Young, then maybe we'll mention him. I think it's interesting. Tremble has never surpassed in 4 years 250 yards. I don't see a year 5 breakout here. I mean, if we're not expecting it for Carl Pitts, we're not expecting Tommy Tremble, are we? Let's be honest. So I think I've put not interested, but we could maybe become interested in Sanders at some point, but not enough for me to even consider drafting even with my last round dart throw.
I just drafted Jatavian Sanders quite late in a best ball, so I'm kind of hoping he does okay.
Late in best ball's fine, isn't it? Yeah, but yeah, okay. Not redraft. Redraft, I'm not playing.
You did very well to not mention that he's the number that he wears on his shirt. If you don't like that.
Okay. So if you, I mean, yeah, he proves my point here. You have got to be good. If you're wearing 0, you can't potentially turn out stat line to involve a 0 in it. You look stupid. You've got to be brilliant. Roquan Smith can wear 0. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Anyway, I could do a whole show on that. The Panthers.
How are you feeling about the Panthers? Do you think
I'm interested?
Oh, okay.
I mean, I like Bryce Young. Like I said, when we spoke about when Bryce Young, CJ Stroud came through, I was very much Stroud over Young. But as we said, it's that debate with I often get in sport, because I was Stroud over Young didn't mean that I was out on Young. It's just that's where my preference was, and I think we've seen enough. I think that Bryce Young could be a good quarterback in the NFL, could be a useful fantasy quarterback as well. This will be the season where I think we make our minds up on that. Was the last half of last season a flash in the pan? Was it the sign of things to come? We spoke about last year about the new offensive scheme coming in. We spoke about all the optimism we had with Canales that it could potentially happen for Young. We'll see that this year. If it doesn't come through, I think we will be talking about who is the next quarterback in Carolina for 2026, though.
Fair enough. Brutally honest as always, Mark. Well, that's it on the Carolina Panthers. We hope you've got some morsels there for your fancy drafts. As we've said, please do check out our other deep dives as we start to march towards the fancy NFL season. But that's enough from us. I think it's goodbye from Mark, goodbye from me, and Malcolm, take us home.
You have been listening to Pestle and Ed of TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Instagram and Twitter.